Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Sunday, let's do our study group for warriors. Mind, body, and soul. Daily discipline. This is how we get through. Let's go through my notes. I know I got a couple new subscribers. You'll catch on. This is how we get down every single Sunday. Before we start off, let's do a little watch check. I don't know what you guys are wearing today. I have one of my favorite watches. It's not expensive. I love this watch so much. I got the Armatron Griffey. I'm wearing the Armatron Griffey. This is one of the first digital watches, came out in 1975. Such a cool little LED digital watch. Basic, all it does is tell time and the date, doesn't do anything else. It's not a smartwatch. I love this little thing. Cost me like 40 bucks at Walmart. Let's get into our study group. I was listening to a talk. Oh, she had a funny channel too on YouTube. I forget what it was called. I tried to remember it. I should have wrote it down. Really funny channel. What a great name. But she was talking about childhood PTSD. And she had a couple interesting points, especially in regards to relationships. And I had never tied the two together. I have had a hard time with relationships in my past with women. I don't know if anybody out there can relate. And I kind of wondered why. Why have I had a hard time with women? You know, what's wrong with me? And when she talked about some of these aspects of childhood PTSD that stay with you through adulthood, if they're not addressed, it started to make sense. And one of the things that she mentioned was something called blind spots. So childhood PTSD creates blind spots. You know what a blind spot is when you're driving. That's the area kind of right behind you in your peripheral, just beyond your peripheral vision that you can't see. That's why you have to turn around, and that's why you got all those mirrors. And stuff can exist in our blind spot, and if we're not aware, we can get in an accident. We can get hurt. And stuff has absolutely been existing in my blind spots. When it comes to interacting with women, I can look back on several different girlfriends over the past 10, 15 years and see a pattern. A pattern of bad behavior, of disrespect, of many things. And I didn't really understand why I was ending up with these rotten, awful women. Well, it's because of the blind spots that were created when I was a kid because of my childhood PTSD. I had a particularly rotten and torturous childhood. If you had a great childhood, oh, I envy you. I didn't. I came from a broken home. I could go on, and you guys would cry your little crocodile tears and say, oh, that's fucked up, man. Me and my brother together, we can start whining about how we grew up on top ramen and frozen burritos, malnourished, the whole thing. And this has created these blind spots. So, when you have a blind spot, it's important to try and get rid of it. This is why you used to have, back in the old days in the 80s and 70s, we used to have these little tiny mirrors that you stick onto your side mirrors, and that would see into your blind spot. And those little tiny mirrors were hard to see out of. But if you got used to it, it would work. I just looked behind me, a quick glance. Oh, it can save the day. And she also talked about how to move forward from this. And obviously, I talk about this too with many of you that I coach and mentor about trying to better yourself, to make yourself a better person. This is what we study for. This is what we work out for. This is what we're eating right for. This is what the entire mind, body, and soul program, this lifestyle is about, is to better ourselves, become stronger. So if, for example, you're coming off of a bad relationship history like I am, what you're doing by bettering yourself is what she called brightening your cab light. And it was an interesting metaphor for making yourself better, making yourself more attractive to the right type of person, because we're talking about relationships in regards to childhood PTSD. So if you've been attracting the wrong type of person, I've been like a pile of shit just attracting flies, but I've turned myself into a good person. So my cab light is getting brighter. A cab light is the light on top of a cab, a taxi cab. And when the light is on, that means the cab is vacant, and then you can hail that cab. If the light is off, that means there's somebody in the cab, or the cab is not in service. You can't hail that cab. It's not going to come pick you up. So if you're trying to attract the right kind of woman, what you need to do through your Mind, Body, and Soul program is to brighten your cab light. That's what you're doing. You're brightening your cab light. You're notifying the right type of woman, hey, I'm available. And there's many things that can dim your cab light. So your lack of confidence dims your cab light. Your attachment to your past trauma and to old ways of handling things. Maybe you might run to vice. Maybe you might self-isolate. Those things will dim your cab light. I thought it was an interesting topic. Let's move on to the next one. Nobody should try to escape suffering. Doesn't that sound weird? You would think, well, yeah, I mean, the purpose of life is to escape suffering. Isn't that what survival is? No. Suffering makes you stronger. If you escape suffering and you lived a life without any suffering, you'd be a weakling, a loser, a go-nowhere, do-nothing idiot, soft, fat, out of shape. What keeps you in shape? How do you get muscles? Through suffering. No pain, no gain. You're literally in the gym, you're ripping your muscles. It's a self-injury. You're causing injury. You're putting yourself through suffering in order to become stronger. You look around the room at a gym and everybody is pushing weight and they're suffering for one reason. If you were an alien from another planet and you didn't even know anything about Earth, you might walk into a gym, into Gold's Gym where I work out, and just not even understand it. Everybody's in pain. They're all being tortured. You might want to save them all. I'll save you, and wrestle them away from the bench press or the lat bar. But you do this because it makes you stronger. So suffering is important. And you have to understand that aspect. So when you're struggling to escape from suffering, you might want to think, well, maybe this will make me stronger. Maybe when you look back on some of your suffering that you've been through as trauma, as pain, as awful, as something you wish you didn't go through, you can look at it as something that made you stronger. Without that, sure, it wasn't fun, but without that, I wouldn't have learned these lessons. I'm so much wiser now. I'm so much tougher now. It's interesting that the story of Jesus in the Bible is kind of meant as a model for our own lives. Some people take the book as very literal, and that's fine if you want to, but let's just look at it as symbolism and metaphor for the moment. And Jesus lived a life of persecution. He tried to do the right thing all the time, and he was persecuted for it. Oh, how horrible that is. Have you ever been accused of something and you didn't do it? Or treated bad when you're doing the right thing, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you still get fucked with? Man, that sucks. Well, Jesus went through that. That was his story, and then he was murdered. He was killed. But it didn't just end there. The book could have just ended there, and you could have been like, well, man, that's fucked up. But he was redeemed. He went through a process of redemption, and then he rose from the dead. And you can take that as literal, or you can take it as metaphor and symbolism of you go through your struggles, you go through your pain. And not only do we have a promise of salvation, because if you're Christian, you believe in that, but just psychologically, you rise from the ashes like the phoenix. You become stronger after what's happened to you. Let's move on to the next one. Some people get it, some people don't. I could stay on these topics for hours. I want to move on. I've only gone through one page. We got 10 more pages to do. Here's a statement that's going to be shocking to some of you, but keep in mind this was said by a woman. And she said, never make a woman the priority of your life. Isn't that interesting? She says this. This is relationship advice from a woman, from a hot woman. Never make a woman the priority of your life. They don't want to be. They don't want to be the priority. A good woman doesn't want to be your priority. Understand what we're talking about. She wants to be in your life. She just doesn't want to be the priority. She wants you to be successful. A successful man, his priority is his path forward. His priority is two things, really. The betterment of self, so he can be strong enough so his cup overflows, and then the people around him, his wife and his kid, can drink off of what overflows. And that overflow may be your love, may be your happiness, may be your money, may be all kinds of versions of success. And she wants you to be driven towards that. And if you're dedicated to idolizing her, to worshiping her, and basically you become her follower, you turn her into your religion, that's weakness. She doesn't want that. She wants a powerful, strong man that she can idolize, that she can worship. She can't worship one of her followers. If you've made her into a statue and you worship her. So I just thought it was an interesting outlook. Let's move on to the next one. Talk about attachment briefly. Oh, I could talk about attachment for an hour and a half. I got in a conversation with a Buddhist. He had to make sure that he told me 5 or 6 times that he's been studying Buddhism for 35 years. So what? Apparently, for 35 years, you don't really get attachment, and let me go over it again for you. Attachment isn't simply restricted to the material. Absolutely, it encompasses the material. You may be attached to material things. You may be attached to money. You may be attached to your car. You may be attached to your house. But it's far more than that. Attachment is grasping. Grasping is far more nuanced than just simply the material. You might grasp at life. You might grasp at love. You might grasp at pleasure. You may have attachments to things that aren't necessarily material, that are more psychological. You may be grasping at an outlook, at a childlike outlook of the world. You may have to let that child in you die to stop being so attached to the past. This is all aspects of attachment. But oh no, all he meant was the renunciate. For him, attachment meant you give up everything that you own and you go out into the woods in your loincloth like some kind of homeless bum. Sure, the Buddha did that, but the Buddha didn't find enlightenment when he did that. He realized the renunciate path was not the path to enlightenment. Whatever. Let's move on to the next one. Here's a funny statement. I was watching a talk by a comedian. I sometimes hate when comedians philosophize. However, many of them are very smart. This guy said, laughter is to shame as crying is to tragedy. Laughter is to shame as crying is to tragedy. And this kind of points out the importance of laughter. And we experience personal shame or shame within a society. You know, you may have cheated on your wife. That may be shameful, but society may have a shame. Say, for example, slavery is one of the shames of our society here. But it's important to laugh at this stuff. If you can't laugh at it, you're not going to get past it. You're going to stay stuck on it. You're going to stay traumatized by it. Just like when a tragedy happens, you need to process that emotion. So trauma happens when you don't process emotion in a tragedy, and when you don't put things together, when you can't walk away from that tragedy with some sort of closure. You stay stuck on it. And what helps you to move through a really horrible thing is to experience some emotion about it, to not bottle it up, to let it out. I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how many tattooed teardrops you got and how many years you did up in Supermax prison. It's important to cry sometimes. You have to. So I just thought it was interesting. We need to protect comedy. We lose our comedians, society starts to crumble. Here's another funny statement, and we'll end it here. I have 8 more pages I wanted to get to, some good stuff too. Fox News is basically black church for old white dudes. Marinate on that. Have a good Sunday.